Rebellion of the Damned. Section: The Origins of Witchcraft in France. Quote, "The witches were a vast political movement, an organized society which was antisocial and anarchical, a worldwide plot against civilizations." From Montague Summers, 1928 Preface to the Malleus Maleficarum. The history of witchcraft reaches back to ancient times. But it wasn't until the later Middle Ages that witches ceased to be, quote, cunning folk, who were sought out for medicinal aid or prophetic advice, and became the devil's foot soldiers in an all-out war against Christian morality and virtue. By the 13th century, witch gatherings were said to be taking place nightly in wooded areas throughout the countryside, drawing crowds numbering in the hundreds and thousands. Pierre de Lancre, a leading French demonologist, spoke of nocturnal meetings that brought together some 100,000 devotees of Satan. People couldn't line up fast enough to pledge their oaths to the devil at these nocturnal ceremonies, which were said to be followed by cannibalistic feasts and mass orgies. Once aligned with the forces of darkness, a witch could, on their own or with the devil acting through them, wield supernatural powers against person and property alike. They were responsible for everything from infertility, demonic possession, and family misfortune, to unexplained storms, crop failures, arson, plague outbreaks, attacks on livestock, and unexplained deaths. This was the basic image that was burned into the public consciousness, and the propaganda used to create a climate of mass panic where, quote, witches could be hunted down ruthlessly and put to the stake, thereby extending the power and influence of the church deep into the countryside. Between the mid-16th and 17th centuries, France's witch hunt was at its height. 40 witches were burned at Toulouse in 1557, 4 at Poitiers in 1568, and 18 at Avignon in 1582. In Lorraine, some 900 witches were condemned and executed between 1581 to 91. In Normandy, there were witch hunts between 1589 to 94, and again between 1600 to 1645. On the French Basque coast, entire communities were said to be taken over by witches, resulting in a succession of mass trials and executions between 1576 to 1605 that ended with nearly 900 witches being put to the stake. The largest witch hunt in French history would take place between 1643 to 45, with 650 witches arrested in Languedoc, a province with strong heretical traditions that trace back to early medieval times, alone. All told, nearly 6,000 people were executed for the crimes of witchcraft and heresy in France. The highest concentration of trials took place in the mountainous border areas, and the accused were disproportionately women from the poorest segments of society. Much debate has gone into the complicated set of circumstances that led to this bloody chapter in history. But it can't be denied that, at its most basic level, the witch hunts were a brutal form of social control, used to keep oppressed and potentially rebellious populations in line. Throughout this period, church authorities demonized heretical beliefs, pagan folk practices, independent women, and rebellious communities. A campaign that was successful both figuratively and literally. It is very likely that the propaganda around these witch trials may have had the unintended effect of stimulating the activities they were intended to suppress. A Upon hearing the details of devil worship and ritual practice publicized in the confessions, more people began to be attracted to the promise of the dark arts, as defined by the Church, and now had models for imitation. Eventually, Church officials began to take notice and voiced concern. After the published accounts of the 1612 possessions that overtook the Brigadine Convent in Lille, members of the Paris Faculty of Theology complained that such publicity was, quote, deadly for the curious, the weak-minded, and the wicked. End quote, and end of section.